Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar on viewing the latest feature releases for Sage Intacct. My name is Ali Pakalnis, and I will help facilitate our webinar today. Before we get started, here are a few tips on using the Zoom platform so you can engage with our presenters and have the best experience possible. You should see a Zoom toolbar with icons for Ask a Question and Raise Your Hand. Please use the Ask a Question feature to submit a question or comment. If you need any assistance, click on the Raise Your Hand button and I will connect with you to help. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation and we will do our best to answer them all. If we didn't answer your question, we will follow up with you personally after the presentation. Within 72 hours of the webinar, you will receive a link to download the slide deck and recorded presentation. Next slide. Today's webinar does qualify for CPE credits. To receive your credits, you must actively respond to 3 out of the 5 polling questions and stay on for the duration of the webinar. If you have any difficulty answering the polling questions, please email elevatelearn@armaninollp.com with questions. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to our presenters, Jeremy Anderson and Jessica Wirtz.
Thank you. I'm Jeremy Anderson. I'm a senior consultant here at Armanino on the managed services team. I come from a background in nonprofits, and I've been an end user with Sage Intacct for several years.
Awesome. I'm Jessica Wirtz. I'm also a senior consultant on the managed services team here at Armanino. I've been with Armanino for about a year and a half now. Prior to Armanino, I did focus on nonprofits as well as worked with Sage Intacct as an end user in the outsourced accounting space. So we also have Sam and Sahar here to answer Q&A if you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm a senior consultant. I've been with Armanino for about a year and a half working on Intacct implementations. I've also worked as an Intacct end user for a few years before that, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
And hi, everyone. My name is Sahar Ahmed. I'm a senior manager here at Armanino. I've been with the firm for about 11 years now. I've worked support and delivery as well, and I'm going to be, of course, monitoring the chat and Q&A section with Sam today.
Awesome. Thank you. And so for today, we do have our learning objectives. We're going to review the new functionalities of the release that was pushed out by Intacct on August 18th. And those updates relate to these modules. We won't read through them today on this slide, but we would like to start with company and administration. There are 2 enhancements to the company and administration module. The first enhancement is to data delivery service. And data delivery service is an additional subscription that you can add into your environment. And so this enhancement allows for additional decimal places past the standard 2 decimal places. This can allow for some increased accuracy on your reporting if you're having issues with any rounding errors. And there is also an update to email delivery and insights. This is an early adopter program, so if you're interested in joining the early adopter program, please contact your client manager. But the email delivery and insights does support a DKIM authentication, which allows for additional detailed visibility into the delivery status of the emails coming out of Intacct. So this can be super helpful if you're having, a disconnect between the emails coming out of Intacct to wherever they're going. With that, we will launch our first polling question.
The first polling question is, can you enable vendor approvals? Yes or no? We'll give you a moment to answer that. So the correct answer is yes. And with that, we'll go on to accounts payable. So in accounts payable, they've now added the feature of vendor approvals. This is widely available, and it allows you to manage the vendor approval process directly within Sage Intacct. Users with the proper permissions can access this approval page from their environment, and you'll see this idea came from the community idea. So definitely let us know when you have a neat enhancement that you like to add, because Intacct is watching and adding these features when they get enough votes. But yeah, I know a lot of clients who have been waiting for this, so I'm very excited about this functionality. If you want to go on to the next slide. So with vendor approvals, it improves security around new vendor creations with limitations on adding transactions until they are approved. And you have a full audit trail of the approval history. As you can see on the side, there is an error message when you try to post. And Jessica, if you wouldn't mind going to Sage Intacct, we'll go ahead and demo this. So if you wouldn't mind going to the drop down and go into accounts payable, we'll then go to vendors. And you'll notice we have a couple vendor approval test vendors, and they are marked as submitted. Now, if you wouldn't mind opening the AP dropdown, we'll go to accounts payable bills. We're going to go ahead and show what happens when you try to add a bill with one of these vendors. So we'll go ahead and select add. And then from the vendor list, let's go ahead and select one of those vendors. So you can see that pop-up shows up, and it will not let you add a vendor until they are in an unapproved state. So if you wouldn't mind, open the AP dropdown. We'll navigate to approve vendors. Now let's go ahead and approve one of these vendors. And we have the option to view, decline, or look into if you want to make sure everything is as it should, or if you want to add a note to the person who submitted, but we can go ahead and approve this. We'll then go back to accounts payable dropdown and go to bills. Select add. And then if we select that same vendor that we had just approved, notice we don't get that error message anymore, and we can now transact against this vendor. So this is a neat feature. Like I said, I'm very excited about. If you have any questions, let us know. We're happy to walk you through this process. But again, this idea came from one of you as in the community. So definitely submit these ideas, because Intacct is watching. And if you want to go on to the next slide on the slide deck. Some of you may have seen the AP automation that was rolled out in R2 for importing bills or emailing bills directly to your Sage Intacct environment. This time around, they added some additional enrollments so more clients have access to AP automation. Another feature is that entity and department restricted users can now upload bills directly from the bill list. Entity restricted users can upload at entity level in which they have access to, and department restricted users can upload at top level or entity level. And if you wouldn't mind going to the next page. Some additional features in accounts payable are that you can drill down to invoice details from bill back bills. This is available for companies using inter-entity bill back, and the drill into invoice details directly from the bill created with billback. As you can see on the right, there is a hyperlink that will bring you to the original invoice. And if you wouldn't mind going to the next page, Jessica will be covering projects.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. I think I have a lot of clients that are going to be super excited about the vendor approvals. So it's really exciting. All right. In projects. So previously, you were not able to add the budget and budget difference to your project summary on a project. So with this update, With this update, you will be able to configure your projects to show the budget and budget difference columns. And when you're importing the budget, it is going to be imported in the budget repository where your standard general ledger budget is added, as long as you're importing it with the project dimension on your import file. So I think this is something that's really exciting for clients that are using projects and have project budgets. And we will go ahead and launch the second polling question now. And in the customer list, when are you able to receive a payment on an open customer invoice? It's single choice, and it's always, never, only in a single currency environment, or only in a multi-currency environment. And we'll give you a moment to answer that. Awesome. Looks like a lot of people got that one right. The answer is always. And so if your environment is a single currency environment, then nothing would have changed for you. So it makes sense if you guessed that one right. The answer is always. So let's jump into accounts receivable. First, we're going to cover, there is an early adopter program. So if you receive single payments for multiple customers, in the early adopter program, you can receive that single payment and apply it to all of those multiple customer invoices that are open. Some examples of when this could be helpful is if you're receiving an insurance payment for multiple patients, or if you're a school and maybe you have one parent that's paying for numerous students that are in your Intacct environment as customers. And so this is super helpful. Another really great thing to notice in the screenshot here is you have a drop down in the receive payment screen. And in that drop down, you can choose one customer's invoice. So that's the standard, one payment to one customer invoice. And then you also have the option for parent and child customer invoices. And I think that's really where the school, the tuition receipts is going to come in handy if you have the parent-child relationship with your customers. But then also you do have just multiple customer invoices that are unrelated to each other. So this is going to be very helpful. And so if you are interested in being an early adopter here, please reach out to your client manager to get signed up for that program. Some other AR updates. We do have document sequencing is available now for payments. So this is going to generate the auto numbering for your payments. Previously, this was available for your customers and invoices. And so this is something where whenever you go to create a new one, you don't create your own ID, your own payment ID or customer ID. It just creates one for you. And it standardizes your numbering sequence so that you can find things easier and search a little bit better. And then also similar to the polling question, in a multi-currency environment, you're now able to pay from the invoices list. And so like I said, if you were in a single currency, if you only had USD in your environment, there's nothing that changed for you. But in a multi-currency environment, if you're in the invoices list, you'll have the option to click pay next to an invoice, and it will bring a pop-up of the receive payment screen that's pre-filtered to the customer and the invoice that you were looking at. And with that, I will pass it back to Jeremy for Sage Intacct planning.
Thanks. You want to go to the first slide? So Sage Intacct planning has some recent updates. And for those of you who are not aware of what Sage Intacct planning is, SIP is Sage Intacct's budget and planning module. It connects directly to your Sage Intacct environment for easy upload of your budgets. But some recent updates are when duplicating or saving a budget, you can do the following. You can duplicate or save the working budget only. You can select specific versions to include, and you can include all versions. As you can see on the right, there are a few options that are available. And some of you may have seen this if you're already using SIP, and you may have not even noticed that it was updated. It was just there next time you signed in. But if you're interested in learning more about SIP, definitely contact your client manager and they would be happy to provide additional information. And with that, we will go to cash management. So another early adopter is the Bank Transaction Assistant. So with the Bank Transaction Assistant, it is a way to streamline and improve the process of receiving payments and reconciling all of your accounts. So what it does is it allows you to assign a customer to a bank transaction in the module to quickly receive on your invoices. It takes posted payments and automatically matches them for reconciliation. And multi-entity currency companies also have, oh, looks like we skipped ahead. There it is. Okay. To receive advances and payments at the entity level. If you want to move to the next slide. So what we do is we can receive a payment by assigning a customer to the bank transaction in the module, and this can be automated with an assignment rule. So what happens is if you have this rule created and it reads the criteria, you can make it so it automatically assigns a specific customer. And when the assigned customer is added, you may receive a payment in bulk. And when there's no invoice available, you have the option to create an advance that you can then assign to an invoice at a later point. But from the bank transactions, you can see that you have the option to select a transaction and receive a payment. From there, you can assign it to the associated invoice, add whatever values you need or description, and select post. And this is all done within the cash management module. So this eliminates the need to go back and forth between AR and cash management. It's all done in one place. But if you're interested in joining the early adopter program, definitely contact your client manager and they would be helpful or be able to get you set up. If you want to go to the next page, some other recent updates in cash management is another early adopter program for the new robust bank transaction import experience. What this does is it's a centralized location for importing all transactions. It has more formats that are supported, and it allows to add some permissions and controls on who can import these transactions. Another feature available is that UK bank files now supports Euro currency payments. Previously, UK bank files only supported payments in GBP currency. You can set the payment currency for each UK vendor, and you have the option to pay with SEPA bank file formats. But if you're interested in learning more, you can contact your client manager. From here, we'll move on to consolidations. And Jessica will be covering this section.
Awesome. In consolidations, we have another early adopter. And this early adopter we did talk about in previous releases. It's for the advanced ownership consolidations. And I do think that this is a really important early adopter program for any partial ownership through tiered consolidation. So if you have a subsidiary that you don't wholly own, that you own a portion of, this early adopter program will allow you to only consolidate the portion that you own, and so you can run your consolidated books. This is still an early adopter. Hopefully it will be widely available in a future release, but if you're interested, please reach out again to your client manager to join that program. And next, we're going to talk about healthcare and nonprofit. And these two are grouped together today because the EMR Connect is released for both healthcare and nonprofit. It kind of they fall in the same bucket for this update. So EMR Connect is for your electronic medical record system and the ability to connect that into Intacct. And so what you'll need to do initially is map from the electronic medical record system into your Intacct GL. And this is really going to help for all of your financial and clinical and then also statistical data, and really allow for some comprehensive reporting with all of that data in one spot being Intacct. And once you have the map created, you can schedule automatic data imports. So you can schedule those daily or weekly. And then I think the biggest piece of this that's probably the most important for the clients that I've worked with in the past is the availability to connect to more than one EMR system. I've had several clients that they go through acquisitions and each location has a different EMR system. And so you have to essentially build this map no matter what, but then with EMR Connect, you're able to have it automatically import into Intacct. So you can have that comprehensive reporting no matter what EMR system you're on. And so this is an additional subscription. And if you're interested, please contact your client manager in signing up. And one additional update that we have for nonprofits is a fax integration. And this is for education environments. So you can focus on educating your students. This is for your tuition billing and student management systems that will allow for more informed decision making, but then also seamless access. So kind of the same thought process as the EMR Connect, but how can we get all of your subsystems linked into Intacct so that you can focus on what you do best and let the systems talk to each other for seamless reporting. And if you are interested in this, please contact your client manager. And with that, we will launch our third polling question.
So this polling question is, can you automate revenue recognition on contract lines? Single choice, yes or no. And I'll give you a moment to answer that. So it looks like 95% of you answered that correctly, which is yes. A new feature available that we'll be discussing in a moment in the contracts module. So a new feature available is the ability to recognize revenue on the contract line invoice. What this means is when you go to create a new invoice, you'll notice that there is an option, if you would enable it in your configuration, that you can recognize revenue when the invoice is generated. So there'll be new fields and elements available to support recognizing revenue when the contract is invoiced. This eliminates the need to run recognition for invoices. It displays a recognize on invoice checkbox on the contract line, and a new recognize on invoice revenue templates are available. And this is an idea that came from the community. So like we've mentioned earlier, definitely submit those topics and ideas because a lot of these are very neat enhancements that I'm very excited about. If you wouldn't mind going to the next page. So when you recognize revenue on the invoice is set to true, journal balances also only display the revenue in the journal balances page. It will not display deferred revenue as the revenue is recognized immediately when the invoice is created. So I'm super excited about this. I know a lot of time could be spent going back and forth after you generate the invoices, where then you have to go and recognize the revenue. For those invoices that you have checked the box, that step is done automatically when you go to recognize or when you go to create those invoices. So I think a lot of you are excited about this, and if you have any questions about it, definitely let us know. We'd be happy to walk you through this process. If you want to go to the next slide. So this is for the Sage Intacct Advanced CRM. And if any of you are unaware of what the Advanced CRM is, it is a way to work with your CRM integrations just to make the process a little easier and smoother. If you wouldn't mind going to the next page. So some new updates include the capability to return field mappings to their default settings. You can reset the default, which can be useful to rework your field mappings. And users will be prompted to confirm when resetting all field mappings. But note that only standard field mappings are returned to a default. So if you add a custom field or any kind of custom integrations, it will only apply to the standard field mappings. And this brings us to help and training, which Jessica will cover.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. In help and training, we're actually going to flip right over into Intacct to take a look at some of the updates in help and training. And so first, we really want to point out that when you're on any screen in Intacct, so here we're still on the bill screen from our last demo. And so if we click help and support and choose help on this page, it's going to pull up a help for creating a bill because that's the screen that I'm on. So if you're ever on a screen and you really just want to, make sure that you're where you need to be and get a little bit of information about what you're doing in Intacct, clicking help and support and help on this page is a great way to find additional information. And then the next piece that we want to talk about with help and training is in the Help Center, there's a new feature called the glossary. So if you go into the Help Center from Help and Support and then go under Basic and into Glossary, it's going to pull up exactly that. It's going to have a definition for any title, any section of Intacct. And so if I search in here, payment, it's going to pull up all of the definitions that have the word payment in there. So maybe I need ACH payment, or if I'm searching for manual payment, but it's going to give me anything with the word payment in it, which is super helpful to understand what am I looking for. And so you can search for anything and it'll pull up that definition for you. That can be very helpful. And then the next update in help and training is to talk about Sage University. So Sage University was recently rolled out. And so the first update is to continue my learning. And so this will help you pick up where you left off with any learning path that you're on, so that you can just grab and go and then finish out that learning path in the Sage University. And then also you'll see inspired by your subject. And so the first time that you log into Sage University or through your preferences, you can identify the modules that you're interested in learning about, and it will populate some learning paths for you. But then it will also gear those recommendations to you based on the learning paths that you finish. So definitely pay attention to anything that is inspired by your subject so that you can continue learning in Intacct. And I will pass it back to Jeremy for dashboards.
Thank you. So in dashboards, the SaaS intelligence, some of you may already have this, and so the updates, you may not have noticed it, but SaaS intelligence is now available in more regions. Previously, it was only available in the United States, but it is now available in the following countries, which are Australia, Canada, Ireland, South Africa, and the United Kingdom. So SaaS intelligence also includes 7 dashboards, which are growth, retention, unit economics, ARR, cash, audit, and product. As you can see on the right, in the image, this is a metric showing some performances, but if you look closely, you can see that there is also an option to quickly navigate between all 7 dashboards. So it's just a neat way to see some performance, different angles of your company. If you're interested in learning more, or if you'd like to get some more information on this additional subscription, please contact your client manager. And then from there, we'll go to our 4th polling question. So this question is, where can you restrict transacting? It's a single choice, which is top level, entity level, both A and B, or not standard functionality. Please take a moment and answer the question when you can. So it looks like 68% of you got that one correct, which is both A and B, which we'll be discussing in the next section, where we can now restrict transacting at both either the top level or the entity level. And this applies for GL transactions. This is a built-in option to restrict transacting to entity level or top level, and there's no smart rule required. You can enable or disable the checkbox in the multi-entity configuration, and this provides flexibility on where transactions are created. And this applies to GL transactions and subledger transactions. So some of you if you were implemented by Sage Intacct, you may have a package that restricts either the GL or subledgers or creation of various levels. This would apply to just the general ledger transacting, but if you're interested in learning more how this can apply to you, or if this would be a good benefit to your environment, definitely let us know, and we'd be happy to walk through how this can apply to you. And if you wouldn't mind, Jessica, going to Sage Intacct, we'll go ahead and walk through this process. So if you open the dropdown or go to the home page, we'll go to Company. We'll then go to the admin page, which we're currently on. So some of you, if you're a full admin and a business user, you'll have this subscriptions page. This is only available for admins, as this is where you can subscribe to additional features. We'll then scroll down to multi-entity management, and we'll go ahead and select configure. So some of you may have noticed, if you have been in this configuration after the R3 release the past week or so, but for those of you who have not, you'll notice that there's now the entity restrictions section towards the middle of the page. You can see that we can restrict access to top level only. We can restrict general ledger transactions to entity level only, and restrict subledger transactions to entity level only. So we have some options to take, but for this demonstration, we'll go ahead and select the middle box. We'll go ahead and select yes. And when we select this one, it also selects the subledger transactions to entity level only. We'll go ahead and select save. Now, if you wouldn't mind, we'll open the company dropdown. We'll then go to the general ledger. Let's go to journal entries. And let's open the general journal. Now, if we edit this top transaction, we'll notice that it's in a draft state, so it has not been posted yet. And Jessica, if you wouldn't mind, we'll go ahead and post this transaction. So now with that checkbox in place, you'll notice that we can no longer transact at top level because we have the restriction limiting to entity level transacting only. And if you wouldn't mind, we'll actually go back to the multi-entity configuration and turn that off and show that we're able to post. So scroll down to multi-entity config management. We'll then uncheck those boxes and save. And let's go back to the general ledger from the applications menu and general journals. Yep. And then we'll notice it's still in draft state. We'll go ahead and edit this. And if you wouldn't mind selecting the post, and you can see that it posted successfully. And this works for both top level and entity level. So had we selected restrict transactions to top level only, if we were to navigate to any of the entity level, we would have received a similar error had we tried to post into that entity. And if you wouldn't mind going back to the slide, and we'll go to the next page. Another neat feature is the ability to exclude adjustments from the trial balance report. This is added functionality to include or exclude adjustments from your TB report, and this is to help simplify year-end reporting with the click of a button. You can see in the image to the right that there is a new added option in the format section. And this is an idea that came from the community that had enough traction that they ended up rolling it out this time. So I'm super excited about that. And Jessica, if you wouldn't mind going to the demo. So we will, from here, we'll go ahead and open the dropdown and go to the general ledger. We'll then go to the trial balance report. In this example, let's go ahead and change the reporting period to current year. And let's select view. So you notice in the adjusting debit and credit column, there is a transaction there that is also reflected in the closing balance. So if we remember account 18,100 and the account 20,050, let's go ahead and customize this report. And if we'll scroll down to the format section, let's go ahead and exclude the adjustments. Now, if you wouldn't mind selecting view one more time, you'll first notice that the adjusting debit and credit column are no longer there. And those two accounts that we did see those adjustments in no longer appear in the closing balance portion of this report. So this is a neat way to, as you're going through your audit or year end, where if you post an adjusting entry and you want to see an easy glance at the before and after effect, we now have this functionality. And if you wouldn't mind going back to the slide, we'll move on to inventory control. So some of you may or may not have the inventory module, but they've now added the advanced kit assembly module. So the new kit assembly module is an automation to increase efficiency and accuracy. What it does is it prompts you to select the correct components and quantities. It supports finished goods and components tracked by lot number, serial number, and expiration date. It supports bin location tracking. It's a backflush option, a component that automatically removes from inventory. This is compatible with mobile printing. It supports the substitution of component items and allows finished goods and components to be stored using separate warehouse codes. As you can see on the right, there is an example of what this new module appears like. So it's a neat way to make sure that you're always selecting the right items and quantities when assembling these kits. So just a neat feature that I'm very excited about. And if you wouldn't mind going to the next page, another neat enhancement to the inventory control is the ability to prevent negative inventory. So this is added functionality to turn off negative inventory. If it's enabled, users are unable to backdate a transaction if this would result in a negative inventory amount. This option can be found in both the configure inventory control and configure order entry. To the right, we can see both of those options, which we can find in either of those settings. And this is a neat way to prevent negative inventory depending on the items or your process. So definitely, if you're interested in preventing negative inventory, you can find that in either of those configurations. This takes us to Sage Intacct Mateo. So what Sage Intacct Mateo is, for those of you who are not aware, it's a module that is designed for diocesan entities. It is a way to manage and maintain donations, funding, and your various accounts with these nonprofits. And some new improvements include an easier way to collect data out of Mateo. And the improvements allow for exporting all lists, which are included below, which are customer list, vendor list, statement list, savings and loan account list. Another feature is that you now can search for a record with filtering capabilities. So as you can see to the right, by simply searching for any part of the word, all of these options are now available. And if you wouldn't mind, we'll go to our next slide, which is our fifth and final polling question.
Awesome. So polling question number 5 is, when viewing the customer list, you're able to edit column sizes and easily filter. And it's a true and false, a true or false. And we'll give you a moment to answer that question. Okay, it looks like we tricked you on one of these. So the answer to that question is actually false. So only 6% got that one right. But the goal is, of course, for it to be true in a future release. So that brings us to user experience. And our first update in user experience is actually you're able to hide funds from entity navigation. So this will only apply if you had your implementation, your template was a nonprofit quick start. So that would have been determined at the time of your implementation, but then also if you have enabled traditional fund accounting. And so if you have both of these things identified, you can determine if your entity is either an entity or a fund. So you need to review all of your entities so that you can hide them from entity navigation. So that is an option that is available. And then an explanation to our trick question here is the list enhancements. I know we've been talking the last several releases about the list beta interface, and previously it was only available for vendors. So when you're in the vendor list, you have the option to click switch over to the list beta interface. So that has been expanded to some attachments, and then also some of your cross-entity dimensions, your classes, departments, and locations, and then also a few different tax list screens. So we're not quite to moving it out to customers, but we do just want to make sure that you know If you're in any of these screens, these list views, and you switch over into the beta interface, and you're using it, you're getting used to it, you're resizing all of your columns, or freezing columns, and doing any of the neat things that you can do in the beta interface. And if you find something that you would really like to see, or maybe something that isn't helpful, you do have the option to provide feedback in that screen directly back to Intacct. So we want to stress the importance of that, since this is something that they're rolling out to all of these screens, the list views. We want to make sure that it's as perfect as it can be before it gets to the customer list. So make sure that you're providing that feedback back to Intacct, and using the list screen if you're on any of, or using the beta interface if you're on any of these list screens. And then our final user experience update is some interface label changes. I always like to say these are kind of the Mandela effect, that they happen and most likely we don't notice until we get to this screen in the presentation. So some of these updates are out there. They would have happened on August 18th. And so if you did notice a little bit of difference and couldn't figure out what it was, this is the list of those changes. And with that, we will move on to purchasing.
Thanks. So with purchasing, enhancement that I'm super excited about is match tolerances. So match tolerances, what it does is it takes the quantity and price between your various purchasing transactions, and it just does a quick check to make sure that everything is in agreement. What it allows you to take control over your purchasing transactions to ensure that the proper amount is paid, and this can help reduce risk and fraud of financial loss, and it assists with identified mistakes on receipts and vendor invoices. It also can help prevent reimbursement of unauthorized transactions. And if you wouldn't mind going to the next page. So below is an example of turning this on within the purchasing module. This can be found by navigating to purchasing and then the settings. And if you have the proper permissions, you can go to the configuration page. With this turned on, you have the option to enable match tolerances. From there, you can select which transaction definitions that this applies to. As below, I have the purchase order and vendor invoice selected. And you can say what percent that you will allow the convert to be. So this, you may have a PR as $100, and then the purchase order can't be over $110 and so on, just as an example. And you can apply this to as few or as many of your transaction definitions in your environment. And this is widely available for all customers. And if you wouldn't mind, we'll go to the next page, which is Sage Intacct Real Estate, which Jessica will be covering.
Awesome. Some updates to Sage Intacct Real Estate is greater visibility, so you can see the late fee notifications on your property, and you can preview your management fees in journal entries. And then also in Sage Intacct Real Estate, there are improvements to the screen timeout time. That had previously been an issue with, when you're running entries or navigating in Sage Intacct Real Estate, the screen would time out. And then there's also additional tip pop-ups throughout the module of Sage Intacct Real Estate. And we'll go back to Jeremy for time and expense.
Awesome. So time and expense, if any of you are not aware, is a neat module that allows you to manage and maintain your employee expense reimbursement and approval process. If you're set up with time expense, previously you would not have had the option to pay or reimburse your employees with a bank file. You'll now notice that you have the option to submit a bank file and generate one to upload to your bank. What happens is after you've gone through the process of submitting expense reports, going through the approvals, and submitting the reimbursement, you have the option to select pay with bank file, similarly to if you were paying an AP bill. in the AP module. So you'll see in the image to the right, if we were to select expenses to reimburse, in that page, we can select the pay with ACH or wire file. After we select that option and all the required fields, we can select Pay Now, which will then allow us to navigate to the bank file generation. And from there, we can create that bank file, just like we would in the AP or cash management module. From there, we'll go to the web services page, which Jessica will cover.
Awesome. Thank you. So in web services, and we will provide this presentation to everyone, but there will be the link here for the developers portal. So make sure to stay up to date on the developers portal blog that includes all of the great new features in web services. And we would also like to make sure that we point out the Armanino-led Intacct classes. So these classes are a really great way to get more in-depth with the different modules in Intacct. And so again, this slide will have this link to the Armanino Academy where you can register for those classes. We do also want to call out there are 3 new classes that were just added. And the first one is actually in just a couple of days. And these are intermediate level classes. So if you've already taken the beginner level and you're ready to kind of take a deeper dive into these modules, please sign up. And so the first one that is on August 31st is the intermediate level of the general ledger. And then on September 19th, we have intermediate accounts payable. And on September 21st, we have intermediate accounts receivable. And so we do want to make sure that we call out if you're currently in the middle of an implementation with Intacct and Armanino, or if you are a managed services client, please reach out to your consultants. You may have a discount code or a registration code that you can use to register for those classes. And I think we have a few minutes for questions. Now we can see if there are any questions we can answer live for you.
One of the questions I saw come up was who can submit a vendor to be approved and who can approve. The answer to that would be similar to any other with creating transactions, that a business user will be required to create as well as approve the vendor.
Awesome. I think we had one question on the project budgets. So let's see if we can flick over into Intacct of how to go into the configuration and set those up. If one of these environments has it for us. We go into projects, and then on the setup tab, you'll go to configuration. So once you're in configuration, you will scroll. And there we go. It was further down than I thought, than I remembered. Okay, so you can click this option here to show the budget column. And from there, you will identify the GL budget ID. And so this is the budget that you're importing into in the budget repository. And so when you're creating your import file, this is a column that you have to fill in. So you want to make sure that the import file and this GL budget ID does match so that it pulls the correct budget. And then you can also identify the account group for the budget, for your budget comparison. And then if you want to see the budget comparison, you'll check this box here. And you can identify if you want it budget minus actual or actual minus budget. And from there, you can click save. And then if you view a project, and we'll just pick any of them, but if we view a project and we go to the project summary tab, and while we don't have a budget imported for this project, we are able to see that there is now the budget and the budget difference columns here. Were there any other questions that we wanted to cover, Jeremy?
We did have a few questions come in about enabling the vendor approval. So just a reminder, it's on the configuration where you have to enable the vendor approval, and then you have to update your security role for the users.
Okay,
Yes, if
yeah,
you want to
I
go
think
ahead
we
and if you go to accounts payable, then setup, configuration. And again, this would only be available for those who have the permissions to view the configuration page. If you scroll down, it's in the approvals section. So right there where it says vendor approval, enable vendor approval, we can go ahead and select that. It's already selected here, but we also can enable email notifications. So those who have the permission to approve vendors would then receive the email when there's a vendor pending approval. Yeah, and then if we select save, that would be enabled. But this is widely available. You don't need to contact your client manager or anything. Should be already set in your environment.
Yep,
Another
and
question.
again, the key was to update the security role as well for the users.
Right. Another question I saw was in regards to AP vendor approvals was, does it go back to existing vendors? Currently, it does not appear that they do apply to existing. It would be only for newly created vendors.
awesome. I think,
All right,
They
well,
were.
thanks, Jessica, and thanks, Jeremy. I think that wraps it up. I don't see any more questions for today. So thank you everyone for attending, and please remember to complete the survey as you close out of the webinar. Have a good day.